Welcome to Go Green Radio, everybody. So glad that you could join us today. We have a very special guest. We have Tom Fox, who's the Senior Legislative Counsel for the Center for Environmental Health, or CEH. And actually, if you want to check out their website while we talk with Tom, you can open a new tab in your web browser and go to ceh.org. I'm a big fan of this organization. They do a lot of work to protect each and every one of us from environmental toxins in a number of different ways. And Tom, I'm really looking forward to talking with you about the Center for Environmental Health. We have so many organizations on Go Green Radio, and they each come from a different lens, a different perspective on environmental protection and environmental public health protection. Let's start by talking about the mission of CEH. What drives the work of your organization?
Okay, Jill, thank you for having me on today, and I'm looking forward to our discussion. CEH's mission is to protect public health and support decision makers by leading science-backed approaches that center prevention and remedy environmental injustice. CEH was formed by Michael Green almost 30 years ago, and it was initiated in response to Prop 65 in California, which requires the disclosure of toxic chemicals in products. And that's sort of how we got our start. But we are not just a California-based organization. We are a national organization, and we work both on the federal and state level. And we also work through a lot of coalitions because we're stronger when we work together.
That's right. We sure are. And it takes a big team to do the work that we're all moving towards. Let's talk about the work that CEH does in a variety of categories. And I'd like to start with toxic chemicals in food. You've got 7 focus areas listed on your website, and I'd like to have you dive deeply into what CEH has done and is doing in 3 of those areas: foodware, canned foods, and pesticides. So let's start with foodware. Talk to us about your work there.
Okay, well, CEH helps institutions transition to healthier and safer foodware. We have a new fact sheet on our website about problems with polystyrene, also known as styrofoam. Polystyrene is particularly bad because it has its benefits. It's cheap and it's lightweight. It's very easily moldable. The problem is it has a very low melting point. It dissolves in lemon juice. I figured that out years ago when I was drinking iced tea and I
Oh,
squeezed lemon into it. And I put my hand on the side of the styrofoam cup and it melted.
oh
So
my gosh.
the other problem is it blows around. You see it everywhere and it breaks up into microplastics and eventually nanoplastics. So it's a particularly um, bad plastic.
Hmm.
Um, so CEH has a certification program called the Green Screen Certified, which helps businesses, institutions, and individuals find reusable or single-use foodware that doesn't have toxics like PFAS and other chemicals of concern.
Yep. We've used CEH and worked with your organization with my nonprofit, the Go Green Initiative. We work with schools, and one of our focus areas is, the food supply of schools, and not just the food itself, but what it's served in. And your organization has been, really pivotal in helping us advise schools on sourcing foodware that doesn't have PFAS, especially in it recently. So, really, really appreciate your work there. Now, what about canned foods? What do you guys do in that category?
Well, we have a long history of working to eliminate BPA, which is a bisphenol. It is used in the lining of the cans and making the plastic. It's sort of like a plastic paint that they spray on the inside of cans so that it doesn't corrode.
Hmm.
BPA is an endocrine disrupting chemical that mimics and disrupts natural functioning of our hormones. Um, if anybody's interested, look up the work that Dr. Swan
Hmm.
has done on bisphenols and how it's affecting not only sperm counts but developments of fetuses. It's a particularly egregious chemical.
Hmm.
Um, so due to CH's work, California added BPA to the Prop 65 list of chemicals in 2015. But that work continues. In 2017, we tested canned foods from ethnic grocery stores and found that they have much higher risk of exposure to BPA. So obviously that has environmental justice implications.
Hmm.
Um, CEH continues to call on retailers to commit to clear timelines for a transition to safer canned foods. They should be investing in development of safer and the safest possible linings for
Yeah.
their cans.
Absolutely. I want to talk about pesticides as well, because I know that you've got some very important work in this category. Talk to us about CEH's work around pesticides.
So we've been fighting bad pesticide laws for a while here. Um, the main culprit has been the glyphosate issue. That's
Hmm.
Roundup. That's the main ingredient in Roundup. But there are other pesticides out there that are particularly bad that we've been fighting, especially in California, which is an agricultural state. We have a lot of exposures to farm workers and their families.
Hmm.
Um, so Monsanto, which is the maker of Roundup, it was recently purchased by Bayer. It's a German company.
Hmm.
They have been hammered with lawsuits, common law tort suits, for failure to warn of the dangers, mostly from farmers and landscapers who have very significant exposures to Roundup. So what they've done is they've been lobbying for a federal law called the Agricultural Labeling Uniformity Act, which sounds pretty innocuous, but what it would do is it would preempt state laws like Prop 65. It would also preempt local laws, like laws that prevent or restrict the use of pesticides, herbicides around schools and daycare facilities. But their main goal is to block tort suits by people who've been harmed.
Hmm.
So they've also gone and introduced into red states mostly bills that would block these tort suits, and those bills have not advanced, which was really interesting, especially in Idaho, which is controlled by the Simplot Corporation, where they mine phosphate ore, which they use to make Roundup.
Hmm.
Last year, that bill failed because of mostly farmers with cancer who have lawsuits against Bayer, who rose up against that bill. And
Interesting.
there is now an effort by red state attorney generals. They petitioned EPA, the Trump EPA. They've asked them to issue a rule that would override all of the case law and would, by executive fiat, preempt state laws. So
Wow.
we're working to fight off that effort.
Thank you. Wow, that I didn't realize that was going on, and I'm so grateful for your work. Tom, I want to talk about the work that CEH does to keep homes, schools, and offices safe. You've got three priority categories in your procurement program, and I'd love for you to tell us, why each of these categories is a priority and what you do to help us procure safe products. You've got furniture, foodware, and flooring. Talk to us about those.
Well, we actually have other folks at CEH who are working on this, so maybe it would be good to bring them on board in another episode. But
You bet.
but I can talk a little bit about what we do on these priority chemicals and these products. We offer um, technical assistance to any companies or entities like state institutions that want to procure large numbers of office furniture, for example. We can provide
Hmm.
technical assistance on how to purchase safer office furniture. We have a guide to healthy office furniture. We've also done a lot of work on getting toxic flame retardants out of furniture. I don't know, I can go into a little history here. Um,
Sure.
there was a technical standard, a flammability standard. It wasn't even really a environmental law. It was a safety law. It was called Technical Bulletin 117, really obscure thing. And
Hmm.
because California market is so big, it resulted in the same standard around the country. So it required that furniture meet a certain open flame standard. And the chemical industry used a toxic chemical to meet that standard. And they had a campaign to defend their toxic chemical using a paid doctor who was going around testifying that these chemicals were saving children from being burned. And
Uh-huh.
basically, they were all fake stories.
Wow.
And when I worked for Senator Boxer on the Senate Environment and Public Works Committee, we held a hearing on this and we exposed this fake doctor and the company that was using basically tobacco science to defend their product. And so, not surprisingly, I guess, Senator
Yeah.
Boxer asked the American Chemistry Council if they were going to expel this company for their fraud, and
Wow.
they refused.
Wow.
Uh, but
Unbelievable.
anyway, that standard was changed as a result of this campaign, and so we no longer have this requirement that toxic chemicals are used in furniture.
I'll tell you, the work that you guys are doing, you're the unsung heroes. A lot of folks have no idea that this is going on behind the scenes, and having an organization like the Center for Environmental Health on the front lines working to protect us all is such a comfort. We're going to take a quick commercial break, but when we come back, we have so much more with Tom Fox from the Center for Environmental Health. So don't go away, folks. There's more Go Green Radio right after this. Welcome back to Go Green Radio, everybody. So glad that you could join us. And if you're just tuning in, let me catch you up. Our guest today is Tom Fox, Senior Legislative Counsel for the Center for Environmental Health, or CEH. And you can check out their website while we talk to Tom by opening a new tab in your web browser and going to ceh.org. Before the break, we were talking about procurement, and we were talking about some of the priorities that CEH has in procurement. And I want to give you a chance to touch on the Safer Choice program. Tom, talk to us about your work there.
Okay, Jill. Well, as I as I mentioned earlier, I believe CEH has been working with this outside entity called Clean Production Action, and we help create a green screen certified standard for food packaging, food serviceware, and cookware. And
Hmm.
these are a third-party certification standard for companies that can, choose safer chemicals for their products. And there is a federal program that's run by the EPA called Safer Choice, and it is a very successful program that predominantly certifies cleaning products.
Hmm.
And the I'm sorry, my computer is playing games with me.
No worries at all, Tom.
So so it's a very popular program with consumers because they can rely upon the fact that EPA has verified that these products contain safer chemicals,
Hmm.
and it is a really beneficial program because it uses a hazard framework so that you can't substitute one bad chemical for another.
Hmm.
And unfortunately, the Project 2025, which is sort of the 900-page um, playbook for the Trump administration, singled out the Safer Choice program for elimination. They
Hmm.
want to either eliminate it or privatize it or do something that was um, nefarious. Uh,
Hmm.
so we have been working with our allies in Washington, D.C., other groups, as well as businesses, including a coalition called Biz NGO, uh,
Hmm.
and our other allies to defend and protect the Safer Choice program. And this happened during Trump 1.0. They tried to kill it then, and the groups rose up and worked with businesses and members of Congress, and they ensured that it stayed in the budget. But
I'm so glad.
now we
Yeah.
have Doge going with a chainsaw.
Yep. Oh boy. Yep. And I'll tell you, even the sponsor of Go Green Radio, Clorox Pro, they have a wonderful Safer Choice line of eco clean products that we're really proud of and that we promote. And we're completely in your court to protect that important program. Safer Choice is good for all of us. Tom, I want to pivot and have you talk to our listeners about CEH's work to take legal action around toxics in consumer products. I mean, you have work in food, home, children, vaping, personal care, fashion, all these different issues. Talk to us about your work there.
Okay. And as I mentioned earlier, CH does a lot of our work through coalitions because
Hmm.
we are stronger together, and we belong to a coalition called the Food Chemical Alliance. And it is a coalition of NGOs like CEH that are interested in protecting people from toxic chemicals in food.
Hmm.
And we joined a petition to the Food and Drug Administration to ban red dye number 3
Hmm.
in foods and drinks and ingested medications. And they recently announced a ban. You probably saw it on
Yep,
TV in the
sure.
media. Um, and so this is a good thing. I don't know whether it'll stick with Project 2025, but
Hmm.
um, this ban has been 30 years in the making. 30 years ago, FDA banned red number 3 in cosmetics because it caused cancer in rodents. And there is a clause called the Delaney Clause in the Food and Drug Act that says that if a chemical causes cancer in rodents, we're not going to wait to prove that it causes cancer in humans. It's got to be banned.
Hmm.
And there are multiple petitions pending at FDA, some of which CEH is a party to ban other toxic chemicals based on the same science. And many of these chemicals were approved 20, 30, 40 years ago. And
Hmm.
the science has just progressed since then.
Hmm.
But yet they don't really have a very robust food chemical program at FDA, although the Biden administration reorganized the FDA and stood up a brand new food chemical division. They brought in a seasoned um, manager from a former EPA official that I know really well, Jim Jones, not the Jim Jones from Gam,
Not the
but
Kool-Aid.
the good Jim Jones from upstate New York. Uh, yeah, it's funny. He and I went to high school in towns right next to each other in upstate New York. Uh, but anyway, he unfortunately Doge went in and cut 80% of his staff, so he resigned a couple of days ago.
Ah, shoot.
Um, and but the idea was that they were and they proposed a program to reassess food chemicals
Uh-huh.
and to take a look at these chemicals that have been in our food system for years, and we know that they cause cancer and other adverse effects.
Yeah. I want to talk about a topic that's near and dear to my heart. My nonprofit, the Go Green Initiative, is our mission is to protect children's health from environmental toxins at school. And so we have referenced many of the resources that you have for parents and others who care for children on your website. And I'd love for you to spend a moment talking about CEH's work around youth and toxins. As we know, children are not just little adults. Their bodies are different when it comes to how they respond to toxic exposure. So talk to us about your work there.
Yeah, we are working to end the threat to kids and kids products using Prop 65 as our main tool to force companies to remove lead. We've worked to remove lead from things like lunch boxes and backpacks and bouncy houses, toys. Um, but there are other avenues of exposure for lead and other heavy metals, right? We've got
Mm-hmm.
the issue of artificial turf,
Mm-hmm.
which is where they use tire crumb as an infill to make it soft underneath. And of course, tires were not meant to be up
Mm-hmm.
against human bodies, especially young children.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we we also have worked using TSCA
Mm-hmm.
which is the Toxic Substances Control Act, and I could talk about what we're doing on the federal level to defend TSCA. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so in terms of kids, we've worked to work with other organizations in California, which
Mm-hmm.
has been a leader in banning PFAS in children's products.
Yep, absolutely. And actually we've talked with and I'm good friends with some of the folks that have been on the front lines of that effort. And I know CEH is part of a coalition that the Go Green Initiative also belongs to that is working on that issue. You know, this has become a real personal issue for me when I found out in 2019 that my local drinking water supply had PFAS in it, but I know that CEH does a lot of legal action around air and water. And I want to give you a chance to talk about some of the ways in which you're on the front lines of protecting our air and water. Um, Give us some ideas around, why your work there matters and also some of the health concerns you have around, in particular, fracking.
Right. So we use Prop 65 to address releases to groundwater and surface water sources of drinking water, because Prop 65 is not just a warning requirement, but it also
Mhm.
deals with releases to water. So we've used Prop 65 enforcement against companies that were discharging PFAS into groundwater, which is source of drinking water.
Mhm.
Um, and we've also used Prop 65 to enforce against companies that were releasing toxic substances into the air.
Mhm. Mhm.
We took some action against some cannabis growers and some other entities that were using diesel generators.
Oh.
Um, we also have a partnership with another group called the Center for Biological Diversity,
Mhm.
and we litigate in California and across the country to enforce air toxic rules. And we have recently filed a case relating to ozone.
Mm. Interesting. Interesting. And tell us a little bit about, some of the health concerns around fracking, because this is something that, eh, folks don't readily understand. I mean, they may know that fracking can cause earthquakes in places that, haven't had that and some of those things. But what are some of the health concerns around fracking that CEH addresses?
Well, fracking involves the injection of fracking fluid under very high pressure into a ground formation, right? Usually a shale gas formation.
Mm-hmm.
And when you do that, when the oil and the gas comes up, it also comes up with the return flow of all that fluid,
Mm-hmm.
and there it it uses a lot of toxic chemicals in order to make the fluid move quicker through the cracks in these microscopic cracks that are caused by the pressure.
Mm-hmm.
And it also picks up things like radionuclides, radioactive isotopes, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And and many of these companies that sell frac fluid claim confidential business information on their formulas.
Yeah.
So they're hiding a lot of the chemicals, but we do know that frac fluids contain PFAS.
Wow.
And when the water comes back up, sometimes they dump it into an unlined pond to evaporate it, and then of course
Mm-hmm.
it seeps into the ground and can evaporate into the air. In some states, they use it to salt the roads.
Oh.
So it's a big problem, and there are state bills this session in various states to ban PFAS in fracking fluid. Colorado did it last year, and other states are moving to do that as well.
Fantastic. We're going to take a quick commercial break, but we have so much more to talk about. Tom Fox, the Senior Legislative Counsel for the Center for Environmental Health. We have a lot more to cover, so don't go away, folks. There's more Go Green Radio right after this. Welcome back to Go Green Radio, everybody. I'm thrilled that you could join us today. We're having a great conversation with Tom Fox, the Senior Legislative Counsel for the Center for Environmental Health. Tom, I want to talk to you about aviation gas. This has been a hot topic in my neighborhood lately because we have a local airport, and folks have been pretty up in arms about this issue. Talk to us about the dangers of aviation gas.
Well, I think everybody knows that leaded gas in cars was banned decades and decades ago,
Hmm.
but they've kept using it as a fuel for piston engine airplanes, small planes. It's called general aviation because they want to maintain an octane of 100. Um, and the problem with it is that when you burn it, it releases lead. And if you are downwind of an airport or under a flyway, you're getting exposed to lead. And
Hmm.
if you're in your community in the Bay Area, I believe I know which community you're talking about.
Hmm.
That particular airport did a study and found very high levels of lead in
Yep.
children who were living basically under the flight path of the airport,
Hmm.
and the sources from the aircraft.
Yeah.
So CEH used Prop 65 as a enforcement mechanism and got a consent order with basically a settlement with 23 California airports, which required them to adopt lead-free fuel as soon as it was commercially available.
Hmm.
And
That's awesome.
I'm sorry.
That's incredible. That's incredible. Yeah, go ahead.
So the issue has been the commercial availability of unleaded fuel. Um, the federal government made EPA made an endangerment finding, basically under the Clean Air Act. There was a petition filed by Earth Justice and a number of groups, including the Center for Environmental Health. We demanded that EPA determine that lead endangers the health of humans in avgas. And once
Hmm.
that finding was made, then there's a legal requirement for the industry to switch. The problem is the commercial availability. There
Hmm.
was a Eagle initiative, which is a voluntary initiative between FAA and the pilots and the fuel manufacturers and the aircraft manufacturers and maintaining companies. And they set a voluntary deadline that by January 1st, 2031, they would ban leaded avgas. Um, but then last year there was a Federal Aviation Administration Reauthorization Act, and Republicans put some nefarious amendments in there, basically mandating that airports continue to sell leaded avgas. And it was led by the Alaska delegation. They were concerned that up in Alaska, especially in the cold weather, that they didn't want to reduce the reliability because they didn't want planes to crash. That was their argument.
Hmm.
Um, but there is a company called that produces this GAMI G100UL. It's unleaded, and it is now available. And there are two airports in California now have made it available, and one in Mississippi. And
Fantastic.
so we are looking forward to the transition to unleaded fuel nationwide.
Hmm. Me too. I mean, in my community, there's an elementary school in the flight path of all of these small planes that are using leaded fuel, and it's they're out on the playground just soaking it up, and it's not okay. I want to talk more about CEH's work on PFAS and hexchrome because we've touched on PFAS. It's just so ubiquitous and there's so much to talk about. So let's spend some time talking about all the things that you guys are doing around PFAS and also hexchrome.
Okay. Um, so PFAS is ubiquitous. They found it everywhere. The
Hmm.
Arctic, the Antarctic, every human being probably in the world now has PFAS in their blood. It's a crisis. It's a chemical contamination crisis. But in certain communities, they have higher exposures, and these are communities that are around Defense Department facilities or airports where they use PFAS firefighting foam.
Hmm.
But there's also communities like the Cape Fear River community in North Carolina, which is downstream from the Chemours facility in Fayetteville, where they
Hmm.
manufacture PFAS. And we have been representing a number of community groups and other NGOs in North Carolina to try to get EPA to force Chemours to test for not the health effects of these PFAS they've been dumping for 40 years into the Cape Fear River. It also gets up into the air and then
Hmm.
is deposited by rain. So people who are on private drinking water wells are contaminated as well. And we filed a petition with EPA to exercise their authority under the Toxic Substances Control Act. Section 4, they can order the chemical companies to do testing. We wanted them to test not only using like rodent tests and things like that, but also to do an epidemiological test of the community who's been exposed to this
Hmm.
particular toxic mix of PFAS chemicals.
Hmm.
Um, Now, EPA said that they were granting our petition, but they didn't actually grant it. They had their own strategy for PFAS testing using Section 4 of TSCA. That strategy has stalled.
Hmm.
They said they were going to issue 24 orders the first year. That was 4 years ago. It's basically stalled, and we don't expect any any additional testing being ordered under the new administration. So it's
Mhm.
really unfortunate, but we have continued to represent that community. We intervened in a case where Chemours challenged the Safe Drinking Water Act health advisory that EPA issued for Gen X, which is the
Mhm.
chemical, the PFAS that they make in North Carolina.
Yep.
And we won that case. And then when EPA issued the drinking water standards, you probably heard about those national drinking water standards for PFAS.
Yep.
Gen
Yep.
X, Gen X was one of those chemicals.
Uh-huh.
And we have filed an amicus brief in DC Circuit in support of the Gen X maximum contaminant level drinking water standard.
Well, I
Unfortunately,
want to thank you for that, Tom, because, and I'll let you finish in a second, but I had my blood tested and I'm in the 95th percentile of the American public when it comes to the levels of Gen X in my blood. And that's not just my generation, that's the chemical that we're talking about. And so, personally, I'm very concerned and I appreciate your work there, but finish what you were going to say.
I was just going to say that unfortunately, we expect the Trump administration, they've already indicated to the court in the DC Circuit, they want to have it remanded back to them so they can basically gut the rules. So, what
Great.
we've done in this year, we helped sponsor a bill that Assembly Member Gabriel has introduced. It's California AB 794. So everybody write that down and contact your local legislator to support this bill. And what it would
Hmm.
do is it would codify the Biden EPA's drinking water standards for the PFAS, including Gen X, and put it into California law as exists, during the Biden administration. So if they gut it, if the Trump people gut the rule, it's still going to be California law and they'll have to meet the standards in California.
Fantastic. And say that bill name again so everybody can write this down.
It's AB, um,
Is it
my computer,
794?
794.
All right. All right. We're going to take action there. You know, the past few weeks have been so stressful for many of us. And folks are talking about resistance in a number of different ways. Talk to us about how CEH responded to Trump EPA withdrawal of PFAS effluent limits.
Yeah. Well, we were very disappointed. This is something that's really important. If you're going to cut off PFAS discharges, you got to do it at the source, right?
Yeah.
These effluent limitations were going to apply to industrial discharges of PFAS. And once they, are discharged out the pipe of an industrial facility, they end up in basically wastewater treatment plants, and then they end up in the sludge from the wastewater treatment plants that's then applied to farms. And yeah, as you can imagine, it gets into the ecosystem that way and into our
Hmm.
bodies. So these were really important, and unfortunately, um, the Trump EPA withdrew them. But then again, they are applying a chainsaw to our government right now, and
Hmm.
anything that was proposed by the Biden administration or even promulgated, they're trying to reverse. So this is very unfortunate that this happened, but I guess we were warned. They did put out that Project 2025, despite the fact that Trump and his campaign lied about it and said he had nothing to do with it.
Hmm.
I'm sure he didn't read it because he doesn't actually read, but I know he knew about it, and he just appointed all the people who wrote it, including his
Yeah.
own lead director.
Yeah, this was foreseeable. It was broadcast. We knew it. It was absolutely foreseeable, and so unfortunate that it was allowed to take hold. But I know that you guys do a lot of work around toxic exposures and pollution prevention, and you know. This is where it's at. I mean, preventing this stuff, it's one thing to clean up a mess after it's made, but to prevent, some of these exposures and pollution, especially in communities that are overburdened with environmental pollution, talk to us about CEH's work in that regard.
Well, our main tool in California, of course, is Prop 65. And through Prop 65, by testing and then bringing enforcement actions, we get companies basically to reformulate.
Hmm.
There was a recent study that showed that Californians are actually, that Prop 65 is protecting Californians, and that Californians have a reduced exposure to toxic chemicals because of Prop 65. That was a
Hmm.
very important study. Um, Unfortunately, I don't have a site to it right this moment,
That's all right. We
but
can all Google it, Tom. No
yeah,
worries.
yeah. Um, but the other thing is that we worked with OEHA. That's the Office of Environmental Health Hazard in California, is part of Cal EPA, and OEHA issues the regulations for Prop 65. And just this last year, they promulgated a rule that strengthens Prop 65. And what it does is it requires the warning to identify at least one chemical for each of the endpoints. So Prop 65, you have to identify if you have a cancer causing substance or a reproductive harm causing substance. And this new rule is going to require that they identify the chemical instead of just a generic warning that, California's,
Ah,
right? So it's going to be a lot more informative. Um, and this is something
yes.
that we asked for and we helped lobby for. And we're really happy that OEHA followed through on that.
That's fantastic. We've got to take a real quick commercial break, but when we come back, we have more with Tom Fox and the Center for Environmental Health. So don't go away, folks. There's more Go Green Radio right after this. Welcome back to Go Green Radio, everybody. So glad that you tuned in today. We are learning so much about the work of a very important organization, the Center for Environmental Health. And you can check out their website by opening a new tab in your web browser and going to ceh.org. Tom Fox is our guest, the Senior Legislative Counsel for their organization. Tom, let's talk about the work that CEH does around petrochemicals, plastics, and climate. Tell us more about that.
So, Jill, I think a lot of people, when they think about fossil fuels, they think about oil and gas and climate change. But
Hmm.
oil and gas are also the feedstocks for petrochemicals and plastics. And the fossil fuel industry has been very aggressive in expanding the production of plastics and the production of petrochemicals. And these include any things like synthetic dyes that we recently banned in school foods. Those are petroleum derived dyes.
Mm.
So,
Wow, I didn't realize that. Yeah, keep going. I'm learning.
well, the industry intends to build out large numbers of plastic plants and petrochemical plants. The big problem is the plastic pollution crisis and
Hmm.
microplastics and
Hmm.
the emerging science about how these tiny bits of plastic are getting into all parts of the human body, including our brains and our reproductive tissues.
Wow.
And so these companies are basically trying to sell us on the idea that they can handle the plastic pollution crisis by burning it. And they call it advanced recycling. So CEH is
Hmm.
working with our allies to basically oppose plastic burning, advanced recycling, and also to reduce the use of plastics and especially problematic plastics, plastics with chemicals in them.
Right. And
Uh,
I would imagine that you guys are, following the implementation of SB 54 in California, which is meant to, take a whack at the plastic pollution problem. That's something that I've been involved with as well. And so, the devil's in the details, of course, in the implementation of that. But yeah, keep going, Tom.
yeah, we have been following that bill and the extended producer responsibility bills that are there's a couple of them that are proposed in New York State, one of which is better than the other, and and this idea of creating circularity and
Mm-hmm.
and um, and uniformity in plastics so that they can be more easily recycled and take them out of the waste stream.
Mm-hmm.
These are all really good ideas. Having a bottle bill like Californians pay,
Mm-hmm.
a
Mm-hmm.
deposit on certain products, expanding that nationwide would be a really good idea
Mm-hmm.
because those products come back in clean, and the recyclers love bottle bills
Yep.
because they get a clean stream that's not contaminated, and then they can mechanically recycle.
Yes. Yep.
Um,
Well, I also want to talk about, various policy issues. We've talked about some during the show, but I want to make sure you have time to talk about, how CEH determines its policy objectives and how you work with policymakers and the public to see these objectives through.
well, we try to look at everything from a holistic standpoint, but also apply a justice lens
Hmm.
to to these issues to make sure that we uh, protect the most vulnerable amongst us, including pregnant women and children in particular, because
Hmm.
they are the most vulnerable, and also people who are fence line communities, communities of color, who are
Hmm.
exposed to toxic chemicals at higher levels and
Yes.
cumulative exposures, right?
Yep.
And unfortunately, we have an attack by this administration on DEI. They've turned it into a dirty word,
Hmm.
and and they have basically banned federal agencies from considering environmental justice.
Yep.
And it's really is, in a way, anti-DEI is truly racist. Let's just
Hmm.
cut to the chase on that. And
Hmm.
that even if you were to get rid of every reference to environmental justice or DEI or any of those efforts, you still have the Constitution and the Equal Protection Clause.
That's
You
right.
still have Title VII and Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. So
That's right.
these initiatives are just or structured ways of implementing the requirements to treat everybody equally. And
Well, I noticed we've been using the environmental justice screening mapping tool for years. I mean, since it first was dropped in the mid 2010s, and it's gone. The climate justice screening mapping tool is gone. It's down from the website, and you know that just goes all through me because those mapping tools took real data from a number of different sources, and you could see where by zip code, by Census Bureau track, data, where there was, a community or a neighborhood that was more impacted with environmental pollution and other um, issues than other zip codes. And that information was the basis of good decision making around where resources need to be applied so that people are equally protected. And sorry, I'm going off on a tangent, but that just goes all through me.
No, it goes all through me too. And I represent CEH with this group called the Title VI Alliance, and it's a coalition of environmental justice advocates and groups. And
Mhm.
obviously the entire community has been devastated. The EPA, Environmental Justice Division, all of them were let go.
Mhm. Yeah.
So
It,
um,
it's a sad time right now, and that's why those of us who, who are advocates and um, ready to fight for what is right and what is just in this country have to remain strong and band together. In the final moments that we have, Tom, and I wish that we weren't drawing to the end because I could talk to you all day long. But I'd love for you to help our listeners understand, first of all, how they can support the work of CEH and what they might be able to do in their lives right now, this week, to take action.
well, boy, that's a big question at the moment, right? What can we
Yeah.
do to say no to what's going on?
Hmm.
People need to stand up and say no to these unlawful acts that are being perpetrated on us. Um, but as far as CEH goes, we would appreciate it if everybody would sign up for email updates from CEH. You can follow us on social media. We're on Instagram. We're on LinkedIn. We're on Twitter or X now, I guess,
Hmm.
originally. But we've also are on Blue Sky, where
Yep.
a lot less fascism on Blue Sky these days, and TikTok. And we also have petitions. We have a petition right now on our website telling the Hershey Company to remove toxic Pulagon from York peppermint patties.
Let's do it. And I know that there's a lot of ways to take action. There's also a donate button, folks, on the CEH website. Keep them alive, keep them up and going. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, CEH, for all your hard work and for being on the show with us today. Thank you to our listeners for tuning in. We'll be here same time, same place next week with more Go Green Radio. And until then, have a wonderful week and do something in your life to go green.